37 degrees, coming up on a new moon. Got a low pressure system with some kind of drizzling rain and snow in the forecast. Perfect conditions to chase the elusive river fish in the Appalachian Mountains, the muskellunge. Hey guys, I'm Kristine Fischer. I'm a full-time kayak angler and passionate muskie bum. So right now we have it's typical winter muskie fishing. We're going to be fishing some deeper wintering pools. We have a major coming up here right now, and it's about to peak at noon. So pretty ideal time to be on the water. And then we also have one of my favorite situations as a muskie fisherman is when a major or minor lines up with the sunset this time of year. And we've got a minor lining up. Couldn't be more perfect. So I'm anticipating we're going to have some evening opportunities, but hopefully I can move a fish or two during this major in the afternoon. Get my GoPro set here real quick. So I've got a YouTube channel that I put all of my kayak fishing tournaments on and a lot of my fun stuff like this right here, muskie fishing, and it's just Kristine Fischer. So the current's moving a little faster right here, and the really cool thing is I can kind of find that speed on the torpedo where I'm not moving. I'm sitting right where I want to, and I can effectively kind of hang out in this area hands-free. And good. So with the figure eight, it's really important to do to read the fish, and you want to figure eight even if you can't see a fish following your bait. I like to vary three things: my cadence, my depth, and my speed. So what that does is it switches things up and can entice a bite. So I will get my rod way down in the water, bring it up, and oh, it's weird on this side, kind of pulse that bait, and a lot of times that's what's going to get that fish, flare those gills, and eat that bait right by the boat. It's kind of been an obsession with muskie and pike ever since I was probably old enough to walk. I grew up fishing on the boundary waters with my family, and we fished a lot of pike and muskie infested waters. And I've got a lot of pictures when I was a kid with a bunch of pike, and we had a little portage lake when I remember catching a muskie. I think I was probably 8 or 9. And I've just been hooked from a young age. I love the idea of fishing these deep cabbage bays with big baits, just casting all day for these giant toothy predators that look so dang cool, for a chance at catching some of those. I was obsessed ever since I was a kid. So that's kind of where that obsession was born, and then it's just only caught fire more and more every year. Well, for wintering muskie, typically they are going to set up in deeper pools along the river, and they don't want to work super hard. So if you can take advantage and find that slack water, those current breaks, any staging point behind a big boulder or lay down where they can just hang out, not have to work too hard. So actually, funny enough, my personal best came on the fly. It was a late November fish, and took a trip with some buddies that were guides for yellow dog fly fishing, and went off a tributary of the Scioto River in Ohio, had to bust ice to access the main river. And the first full day of fishing, I mean, it was so cold, and it was so brutally miserable, didn't move a fish, and we went out for day 2, and at the very last part of light on day 2, I ended up, by by the grace of God, ended up hooking into this giant 50.5-inch muskie on the fly. So that was my personal best. I've caught, my personal best in the kayak is a 49.5-inch that came 2 years ago on Lake St. Clair. I've caught several upper 40s fish, lots of mid 40s, even more lower 40s, upper 30s. But yeah, my PB in the kayak is a 49.5-incher. I'm still waiting to break that 50-inch mark in the kayak. So as a lot of people know, a good portion of musky eats happen right by the boat on the fishery. So today we are fishing a single point access, using the motor to kind of kick back up to the top of the pool. And I've got 3 areas that I'm fishing. So a lot of times I fish by myself, and float trips just aren't an option for me. So I need to be able to have areas that I've got a lot of fish in water within the distance of the boat. So one of my favorite techniques, I've been fishing a lot of these smaller southeastern rivers the last 5 years, and that's kind of become my preference when it comes to muskie fishing. I love the river muskie, and a lot of times, especially in the early spring and early summer before the waters get too warm, my favorite way to catch them are on musky 4 to 5-inch crankbaits. The fish eat a little smaller that time of year, and especially in these smaller river systems, I'll find that they eat kind of small. And one of the things that I learned very quickly, very similar to other types of fishing, is that having the right rod for the right technique is imperative to having success. I took a friend with me one day, and I throw a crankbait on musky crankbait on a rod very similar to what you would with bass, just beefier. So I throw my musky cranks on like a 7/9 heavy mod fast. So there's a little bit more parabolic bend in that rod, helps absorb some of the thrashes and that the fish jumps. It keeps the musky pinned a lot better. With a faster action rod, those fish can, it's easy for them to get off. And I remember being on a really good crankbait bite this particular time, and I gave my friend that I took with me my crankbait rod, and I thought, I'll just throw it on my beef stick, it'll be fine. And I had probably a fish that was pushing 50 inches come up and figure 8 on my crankbait and go back down. And I knew it was around perfect timing. I could probably get that fish to eat because it came in hot. And I thought to myself, if this fish eats boat side, it's gonna be really, my chances of landing this fish are not good on this rod. It's probably gonna throw it almost immediately. And the next cast, sure enough, that fish came in, saw the gills flare, and hailed the crankbait. And after about 5 seconds of those big notorious head shakes, popped out. Probably would have been my biggest kayak fish, and I didn't probably have the right gear for that. I really like that spot over that left column over there. A little deeper hole. So, though muskie is at the absolute top of my list as my all-time favorite species, I'd consider myself a pretty well-rounded multi-species angler. Like I mentioned before, love pike fishing. That was kind of my big thing growing up. Smallmouth bass have moved up on my list. I've got an affinity for big brown fish. I'd take smallmouth over largemouth about any day. I also like fishing the salt. I love getting out and fishing for bull reds, even offshore for the pelagic fish. For me, it's really about the trophy. I'm not really big into panfish or kind of the smaller species out there. I love going after predator fish for one, but trophies of any species is kind of my thing. So my personal best smallmouth was fishing Lake St. Clair, and it was a pre-spawn deal, and I remember the weather wasn't super favorable, but that's typically, good, can make for good fishing. and I was throwing a half-ounce scrounger with a 6.5, 7-inch swim bait on the back of it. So big swim baits for big smallmouth, and that's a really popular way to catch them, especially on the Tennessee River system in early spring, is big swim baits. And there's nothing more gratifying, and I think that translates right over to musky fishing, than throwing big baits for big fish. So, like I said, fishing a single axis and using a torpedo to kind of see how far I can get up. I scouted this area on Google Earth, and there looks to be another couple of pools, but those are separated by a series of shoals. So the last set of shoals, we were able to use the motor and get right up them. This one looks a little different, and we're going to see if we can, we may have to get out, but we'll see if we can get up them. So when I'm going into a tournament, my homework or prep work, if you will, actually starts months in advance. I've got kind of a few things that I run through regarding the fishery, regardless if I've been on it or not. And those things include spending hours on Google Earth. I'll utilize the history feature and go back years, especially if they're lakes that have those winter drawdowns and they draw the lake way down. I like to go back and see kind of what the bank lines look like, or look for little subtle nuances that otherwise you wouldn't notice. I look for water colorations, apparent maybe springs, good areas with vegetation, and Google Earth can tell you a lot of those things right there. The next thing I'll look at would be something like navionics with good mapping and contours, especially when I'm looking for areas that, staging areas, secondary areas, transition areas, creek channels. The navionics app will help me with that. Lastly, I'll do a little bit of online research, see if there's any, I think that it's important when it comes to like other people's input on the lake or dock talk. Take it with a grain of salt, be aware of it, but don't bank on it. Be able to at least fish to your strengths. And then when I'm actually at the lake, my thing is covering as much water as possible. After I select a few areas, I try to run 3 or 4 ramps a day, fish sun up to sundown. I do very little actual fishing, but I'm mostly doing a lot of looking, a lot of graphing, looking at the water temperature, water color, little areas that, might hold fish, and I want to try to find a spot A, B, C, and D within an area in case those fish, weather changes, something happens, and those fish need to pull off or move somewhere different. But covering a lot of water, I mean, it's nothing for me to cover 10, 15 miles a day in practice looking. So we were able to use the motor to get up the last 4 sets of shoals. Had to drag up this one, but I think we're almost there. Yep. Alright, so obviously it's getting a little cooler outside because our light drizzle has now turned into sleet. So temps are dropping a little bit. We're approaching that evening bite, lining up with the minor. So hopefully this next magic hour might give us an opportunity. the nomadic lifestyle that I live can be very taxing physically on your body. You know, fishing all the time, living on the road, it's really difficult to stay in good physical shape and get good sleep and have a good diet. And honestly, for the first few years, that was very challenging for me. And I got to a point where I kind of, noticed, okay, I've got to start implementing some changes here so that I can still fish for 12 to 15 hours a day and not feel worn out and have the energy that's necessary to do something like that. So some of the things that I've kind of learned living on the road is, never underestimate the importance of prepping. Prep work is huge. A lot of times I will, if I've got the time, I'll cook up the meals for my week and just keep them. And I'll eat the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Keep all these meals in little plastic containers and take them with me on the road. And always making sure I've got plenty of water. Dehydration is a real deal. And a lot of times if you're a hardcore, diehard angler like I am, the last thing that you think about when you're on the water and the bite's good is drinking water. So having water there, I try to keep it within eyesight, so I'll notice it, drink it, and then remembering to eat on the water is big also. You can never underestimate the importance of a good nutrition and good sleep.
Oh, God! Jeff! Musky! Oh, my God! Ah! There we go! There we go! Stay... No! Oh, my gosh. I was at that bank, and I was like, that's it. That's what I want. Gosh, that was a nice fish. Oh! We hooked up, though. All right. Oh, that was a nice fish. I saw it out there. Right when you said that, I just saw that bank, and look at that, there's hardly any current right there. We've got a bunch of wood. Oh, that was a nice fish. That's okay. It's a good sign.
So tackle prep for me is kind of a chaotic system that I've got going. I'm not a super organized person, but with the help of some of the storage options that I've got from Plano, I've been able to be a little bit more organized and, more importantly, carry a lot more gear. So what I'll do, I've got 2 big sportsman's totes that I will put a lot of individual plastic boxes of terminal tackle, EWG hooks, all that stuff, swim baits, swim jigs, shaky heads, the works. That'll all ride in those totes, and then I'll have another tote full of just varieties of plastics. And then what I do for a tournament is, depending on where I'm going and what the bite is, I will then take 5 or 6 of those individual plastic boxes, whatever plastics I need, and I'll have those available to me and bring them on the kayak. So my truck is kind of, like I like to say, it's like a traveling tackle shop, and all of my stuff kind of rides with me. I've never had the back seats down in my truck to this day, and it's chock full of gear. So I have whatever I need, whether it be extra reels, extra rods, extra line, and most all of my baits come with me when I go on the road.
So, nice long day in the beautiful weather, musky fishing. Got to explore a ton of new water. Used the Torpedo to get up about 5 sets of rapids and into some pools that I had never seen before, so that was pretty cool. So obviously got a little snow and ice last night, which way better than freezing rain. We're gonna give it another go for day 2. Try some different areas and maybe run some ramps and fish a bunch of the deeper pools close to the ramps and cover as much water as possible, see if we can't trick one of these fish. So we got a major right now. Might be a little bit of a window, so we've got to fish really hard for the next few hours. Hopefully make something happen.
So when looking at what makes a good fishery, it's kind of a multi-faced question and a multi-faced answer. For me personally, I almost look at you know, fishing pressure definitely plays a role in, however, you've got lakes like Lake St. Clair, which border metropolitan Detroit and Windsor, get more pressure than any lake in the country and consistently produces not only quality but quantity of fish all year. So I think almost more important than the amount of fishing pressure is the ecosystem of these lakes and river systems. I think having good spawning habitat, having consistencies from the fishery, having a good stocking program, having good genetics, plenty of forage for these fish obviously play a huge role with less competition. I think all of those things kind of factor in making a fishery remarkable. And I think, to me, you know, that consists of vegetation, ample cover, areas these fish can get away from things, and yeah, I get plenty of bait, plenty of forage for these fish to be able to grow. And I think, you know, definitely the growing season plays a big role. That's why those Florida strain bass get so big and down south, is they can get bigger a lot faster. But that's not to say like some of these deeper bowls up north don't produce incredible fishing as well for bass anglers all over the country.
So yesterday, used the motor to kind of explore a new area, cover a lot of miles, get up several sets of shoals, and just, you know, try to see as much of the river as I could. Today, fishing a very specific pool, but just using it to kind of reset, drift, reset, drift.
Sucker patterns today. The water's got a little color to it, so obviously I chose one with a chartreuse tail. This is the Chaos Poseidon. Chaos manufactures these. They offer in a 10-inch and a 12-inch. This is the 10. So just essentially big paddle tail swim bait, big rubber. There's a good action to it. And these fish this time of year eat big, and they feed on these big suckers. So that's what I've been getting most action on, is the Shadzillas and Poseidons, any kind of big sucker imitation.
Man, when it comes to the kayak fishing community and the friendships that I've kind of fostered over the years, it's absolutely unparalleled. You know, I think a lot of us, we all come from very different walks of life, but there's something that's, I think, ingrained in each of our DNA, and we're cut from the same cloth. Kayak fishermen share a very unique bond and an innate passion for what we do and being on the water and having this experience in the sport of fishing, kayak fishing specifically. And it's almost like when you walk into a room at a tournament full of 150 people, you feel like you can walk up to any of them and you've known them your whole life. And that sense of belonging is something that I have never experienced with any other group of people in my life.
So I've been out on the river now. This is my fourth all day. And the very first day out here, I hooked into a 40-inch male on a Poseidon. A little different coloring, different location, but yeah, caught a 40-inch male on the very first trip, and I knew that the rest of the trip I'd have to pay my dues. And here we are, paying the dues. So when it comes to the proper handling of these fish, it's imperative that we educate people, because though they look big and bad and mean, they're actually very susceptible to high mortality rates. So it's so crucial to take care of these fish, and that means having a net large enough to where that fish, even a 50+ inch fish, can remain in the water comfortably at all times. That's probably the most important thing, and you want to make sure that everything you do with that fish is in the water, in the net. When you're getting your camera ready, fish is in the water. I remove the bait when the fish is in the water. Keep the fish in the water at all times. A lot of people I know like to get measurements on their fish. Personally, I think it's best just to practice a quick safe catch and release, catch, photo, release if you want to get a quick photo. I will only bump a fish if I know they are over 50 inches. And I've got a really good measuring board for that. Like I said, I've only used it probably 2 times ever on my kayak, when I had a fish that was just under 50 and just under 50 again. But the reason for that, you know, that just keeps the fish out of the water a lot longer. I can usually estimate how long the fish are. If you do want to get a measurement on your fish, make sure that if at all possible and you're near the shore, put the board in the water and lay the fish on top of it. We call that a wet bump. Always make sure, especially when it's a little warmer out and the boards get hot, it's not good for any species. Make sure the board is wet, and this is a very quick and painless process for the fish. Well, we are gonna call it a wrap out here on the river and the Appalachians. So fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to get to spend 4 days out on one of my favorite places in the country. This is kind of how I unwind. It's my disconnect between bass tournaments, and y'all, when I can just get out here and just be on the river in the middle of the mountains and chuck big baits all day, I'm pretty happy about that. Definitely my release, definitely my escape from everything else. So, and also got to catch a muskie, and that's always a huge bonus when you get to connect with one of those very elusive predators. But yeah, I got to get a 40-inch muskie on my first day. It snowed last night, and the whole river is just coated in this white, glistening powder from Mother Nature, and it's beautiful. So couldn't be happier to be here. Plus got to explore some new water. That's one of the really cool things. Got to really see how I could utilize the Torpedo on these rivers to get up different sets of pools, and I got eyes on a whole entire new stretch of river. So I'm gonna keep that in the back of the mind for some early spring and late fall fishing. Thanks for hanging out with us, and everybody be safe out there.